So thank you for coming, David.
Thank you, Gillian.
And the first question is, what is mediation?
Mediation is an opportunity for people in dispute to talk, to listen to one another, and to find a way of working together which suits both of them, and therefore avoids the need for them to go into a formal grievance process, which is often adversarial. It often exacerbates the conflict, makes the situation worse. Whereas in mediation, what mediation does is it helps perhaps calm the conflict a little, allows the parties to express their concerns, their needs, their goals, express how they feel, listen to one another and find, as I mentioned, a way of working which suits both of them. It's a confidential process. What makes mediation very different is the parties come into it in good faith. They have a without prejudice conversation. It sounds a bit legalistic, but what that means is what's said in the room stays in the room. All of the notes from the mediation are destroyed at the end of mediation in front of the parties. There's no record of mediation kept, apart from the agreement that the parties reach, and even that remains confidential between the parties. Mediation is non-adversarial, and what we mean by that is the parties are able to come into an approach which is building a consensus between themselves, where they can talk to each other without needing to blame the other person, to find a judgment on the other person.
You mentioned earlier, David, that mediation really does work. I'm wondering, at the end of a mediation meeting, what is it that happens?
Well, of course, at the end of the mediation process, the parties have worked extremely hard, and mediation tends to last for one full day. So as we approach the end of the mediation, we're into what we call the problem-solving phase, or the action planning phase. And it's during that phase where the parties start to identify some outcomes and some agreements. Those are recorded often in writing. And it's really up to the parties what happens with that. It tends to be signed by both parties at the end of the mediation process. But of course, mediation is absolutely confidential. So one of the questions that we'll ask the parties as mediators is, does anyone need to see this agreement? Does anyone need to be aware of what you've agreed? That might be a manager, an HR professional or someone else. So we have that discussion, and it's agreed what the status of the agreement is. The mediator will provide follow-up and support to the parties for as long as they need, but it can often be up to one full year after mediation concludes.
What are the benefits of using mediation in the NHS?
And the first benefit is it avoids a lot of the stress and the anxiety that people experience when they're in conflict and in difficult situations at work. Mediation can nip issues in the bud quite quickly and quite effectively and prevent them escalating. But at the other end of the dispute cycle, when perhaps the dispute has gone on for some time and there's very strong emotions and people are feeling very aggrieved, it can bring people together and it can help them find a solution which works for them.
In a hospital or NHS organisation, who is it who does the mediating?
So the first step is to train managers and leaders to act as mediators and help resolve conflicts and nip them in the bud. Within many organisations as well, we develop an internal mediation scheme where we train individuals to act as peer mediators in the workplace. We train them up to an accredited standard, to a professional standard, and they will then work to resolve disputes within the organisation through a coordinated body. The third group of mediators we often find are external third parties, such as ourselves, where we're called into an organisation, often in disputes which are very complex. That might involve some discrimination issues, it may involve multiple parties.
So, where an NHS organisation has its own set of internal mediators, how do they get chosen for the role?
Actually, anyone within that organisation can be a mediator, from clinicians, nursing staff, right the way through to porters and others within the organisation. How they're chosen? The organisation will go through an interview process, there's an application process. I think one of the key messages is taken very seriously. And whilst anyone in the organisation can be a mediator, not everyone necessarily is equipped and enabled to be able to mediate in their own organisation. So going through a process, a recruitment process, can really help find the right people that the organisation needs.
If I work in the NHS, how can I get involved with mediation?
The first one is that we normally set up a steering group or some kind of a body within the trust to coordinate the mediation scheme, so there's an opportunity to be involved in that. We run roadshows throughout the organisation promoting mediation, so people coming along to those roadshows, finding out more, or actually joining the roadshows to share their experiences of conflict, to share their experiences of mediation. Obviously, another way of being involved is actually engaging with the mediation process, and I think if there are people within organisations who are experiencing conflict, who are stressed, who are finding it difficult to come to work, who are feeling anxious about their relationship with a colleague, with their manager. They can also get involved by finding out more about mediation and perhaps taking that first, often tentative but quite courageous step towards using a mediation service.
If you're interested to know more about the field of mediation, you can visit the TCM website where there are lots of resources, and that's at thetcmgroup.com.